Young's Literal Translation says, He is pierced for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace is on him. And by his bruise there is healing to us. All of us, like sheep, have wandered. Each to his own way we have turned, and Jehovah has caused to meet on Christ the punishment of us all. God takes all of the sins of everybody and puts them on Jesus. Then God takes the punishment for those sins, the judgment, the wrath of God against those sins. He takes it and puts it on Jesus. Do you see what I'm saying? First, God puts on him the sins, then he puts on him the punishment for those sins. He puts on him the sins, then he puts on him the judgment for those sins. God, let's read here in John chapter 12. In verse 31, it says, Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. If you read that verse, you notice that the word men is in italics, which means that it was not there in the Greek, in the original language. It was not there. It was just put by the translators to help us to understand. In this case, unfortunately, they misled us. Because if you read it without the word men, then it says, And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all unto me. And we've already said, oh no, when Jesus is lifted up, he will draw all people to himself, which is actually not true, because we see people that are not believing in Jesus. We see people that are going to hell because of not believing in Jesus. So what happens? Those ones have not been drawn to him. But he said all. I will draw all. That means every. That would be the same as saying that everybody, nobody is going to hell. All of them are believing and going to heaven with Christ, which we know is not true. So clearly, Jesus is not talking about all men. If you read the context, he says, Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up, when the prince is cast out, me, I will be lifted up. When was Jesus lifted up? On the cross, he was lifted up. I will draw all. All what? Judgment unto myself. And how do you know he's talking about judgment? Because it ends by saying, This he said, signifying what death he will die. So Jesus was actually talking about his death when he said, I will draw all unto me. He's talking about his death, all the judgment that killed him. When Jesus was lifted, because God had put on him all of the sins of everybody. When he was lifted, he was like a lightning rod attracting the wrath. Like a lightning rod attracts lightning to it. Jesus is the judgment rod attracting the wrath, the judgment, the punishment of God on all sin. Jesus attracts all of that into himself. It is all released into himself. God releases all of his fury into Jesus. I have something I'm going to say about that though. God releases all of his fury, all of his judgment into the body of Jesus. This is happening in the spirit. The people watching cannot see this because it's not a physical thing. But in the spirit realm, this is what's going on. Judgment is coming upon Jesus. If they had seen in the spirit, they would see all of this wrath, all of this anger, all of this judgment of God coming upon sin. It's not even coming upon Jesus the man. It's coming upon the sin that he has become. It's coming upon the death that he has become. It's coming upon the Satan that he has become. In that moment, he's attracting all of God's wrath in himself. Hallelujah. So then Jesus said, this is Matthew 26:38. Then Jesus said, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. And he went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Jesus knew what this cup was. And he knew how horrible it is. It was not the beating. That was nothing. Even though it was terrible, it was nothing. He said, Don't fear the one who breaks the body, beats the body, who destroys the body, but fear the one who can destroy the soul and the spirit. That's God. And so Jesus is saying, that's in Matthew 10, by the way, 28, where he says that. He says, Fear the one who's able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. Not just the body being broken, but the soul and the body in hell. That's God. God poured his wrath on him. That was prophesied in Isaiah 51:17. Awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which has drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. This is the cup that Jesus wants to pass away, the cup of God's fury, God's wrath. And he says, thou hast drunken the dregs of the cup of trembling, and you have wrung them out. In other words, you've drunk this cup and finished it out. There's nothing left in this cup anymore. In Isaiah 54, 7 to 8, he says first, okay, I'm going to come to that, but Jesus attracts upon himself the fullness of God's wrath. It comes into him. But God is not pouring wrath and anger on Jesus, the man. No. He's not even pouring it on Jesus, his son. No. In this moment on that cross, this Jesus is sin. This Jesus is death. This Jesus, it represents literally his Satan. And God releases all of his wrath upon him in that moment, because he has embodied everything that we were, sinners and children of wrath. God releases all of his wrath upon him to deliver us. He releases all of his anger upon him to set us free. Hallelujah. God unleashed all the anger. God never had any more anger left. He released it, all of it on Jesus. He released all of his wrath and all of his judgment and all of his anger for every sin that had ever been committed and would ever be committed. Released it all on Jesus in that moment until God was satisfied. He is the satisfied God. Hallelujah.